Boy, we've got to call them to a biblical standard to our students. We're not just doing this to make your life miserable. We're not asking you to obey us just to be mean. There's a purpose behind it, and let's call them to a biblical standard.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Classroom management can make or break a classroom. You can have the most incredible lesson prepared. You can have a top-notch hands-on activity that engages every learner. You can be the most organized, credentialed educator, but without effective classroom management, all of those will be reduced to nothing in a classroom. Classroom management touches so many different areas of the classroom and its daily workings. It's a topic we could literally talk about week after week. And whether you're a seasoned teacher or maybe you're battling your way through that very first year, classroom management is a daily priority. So, as you may have likely already guessed, today we're going to talk classroom management. But first, let me say welcome back to all of you, our listeners. We count it a privilege to be a part of your day. I want to again invite you to go to our website, teachereditionpodcast.com, to learn more about the show, about our guests, and to listen to the episodes. By the way, there's quite a library there. There's a lot of episodes. So if you're just joining us, or maybe you missed some episodes along the way, be sure to take a few minutes and go back and browse through that library. Of course, the Teacher Edition podcast can also be found on Facebook as Teacher Edition Podcast and on Instagram and TikTok as Teacher Edition Pod. For those listening, we want to also invite you to jump over to YouTube where you can watch this video as well. You know, this time of year can be a long stint. We're through the holidays. There really aren't a lot of holiday breaks coming up. And in many places, the weather just isn't quite as pleasant. But you as a teacher or an administrator, you're the one leading the charge. You're giving your all to keep everyone engaged and learning. You aren't alone in that. Educators everywhere are doing the same in their classrooms every day. And I just want to remind you again of our heart. Our heart for this podcast is just to be that weekly source of encouragement for you. You're down in those trenches, and we want to be a blessing to you there. And of course, if you know of another educator who isn't listening to this podcast, take an opportunity to share this with them. Let's encourage each other in our calling as educators. Speaking of calling to be an educator, today, Marc Koster is here with us on the show. Marc has been at Grace Junior and Senior High School in Simi Valley, California since 1999. He taught history for 20 years before leaving the classroom for full-time administration about 5 years ago. Marc's wife, Jennifer, is also an educator, and I can't help but wonder if their daughter will also be an educator. I had the privilege of meeting Marc and Jennifer at a conference. Boy, it was probably about a year or so ago, and I just really enjoyed the chance to fellowship with them, even just for the little bit that we were there. So Marc, welcome to the Teacher Edition podcast. I'm really looking forward to picking your brain a little bit about classroom management today.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for having me. It's a privilege to be asked and to be here.
Okay, so Marc, before we unpack the topic of classroom management a little bit, tell us a little about yourself and what you do. Tell us, I guess, maybe your story of how you became an educator.
Yeah, good question. I went into college like so many people, not really sure what they wanted to do with their life. So I majored in business because I felt like I had a lot of options. I had a dad who was a businessman. And so that was the direction that I would go. And after a couple years of being a business major, I realized that wasn't the right fit for me. I enjoyed the classes that had to do with like management and hated the classes with numbers. And so it just wasn't the right fit.
Yeah, I kind of need this.
So by the end of my sophomore year, I just started thinking like, boy, I think I'd like to be a teacher. And at that time, I really was, I thought that teachers had to be a certain way. Like I thought, one, you had to be a genius. Two, you had to go to school forever.
Well, those are true, right?
Right. And so, but then I just really felt the Lord tugging at my heart, saying, hey, I think this is where you should probably pursue this. And I enjoy the idea of working with kids and being able to minister to them. And I loved teaching government. I loved talking politics at that time in my life. And I liked history. And I thought, boy, I could do that. And so People get into teaching for different reasons, some because of love of subject, some because of love of the kids, some for ministry. I think mine was more of the kid relationship part than it was necessarily the subject matter initially. Of course, the more you teach it, I find the more you grow to love it. And so it was at that point, I was actually at the Master's University in Santa Clarita, California. I'm from Washington State originally, but I'd come down for college because when you're in Washington, going to school in California is really cool. And I wanted to go to a solid Bible school as well. And so we came down to the Master's and had a wonderful 4 years. And they prepared me for education, or for at least history. I ended up getting my teaching credential at Seattle Pacific in Washington State. And before the Lord brought me back down to California in 99. And at that point, I really saw myself being in public school. I had student taught in public school. I had subbed in public school. I had coached in public school. So I felt like that's where the Lord was leading me. And just series of different events. Like everybody else, my path didn't turn out the way that I had envisioned it turned out. But that's a great thing because God knows better than we do of that path. So in 99, I came down to Simi Valley, California, and I've been to Simi, I think, once before. And yeah, spent 12 years full-time in the classroom, spent about 8 years in a teaching/teacher mentor role, and then became the Dean of Academics for a year. Now I'm in my 5th year as the principal of the junior senior high. Grace School is a preschool through 12, but we're actually on 3 different campuses. So we have a preschool campus, which is located on our church facility, and then we have an elementary campus, high school campus. It's not that we're so huge. We have 335 students on my campus right now. But Lord brought us down here, and my wife and I met her down here, and we've been, enjoying serving in this community. And it's really a blessing to be a part of a community of church school connection that is really a good fit. So,
Wow.
so
That's
here I
great.
am, and as most people in Christian schools, I've taught every history level at some
Of
point. I've
course.
also taught. Somebody asked me recently how many different classes I've taught over the years, and I think it was like 12, because again, at a Christian school, you do
That's
teach
right. Got to do it
study
all.
skills and speech and pre-algebra and whatever else is out
And
there.
coach.
And oh my, I still remember that very first summer I got a call saying, "Would you coach junior high girls basketball?" And I
Oh,
thought, and in my education classes, they said, say yes to everything. You want a job, and
there
so
is no job
so I,
description. Right.
that's right. And so I jumped in and did that for 1 year, not 2, but 1 year.
I
And
noted that.
and so here we are, and excited to be able to serve this community. And
That's
there's obviously a
excellent.
lot. There's a longer version of that story, but that's how we are here today. And yeah, and Jenny and I met. Actually, it was in April at the Bob Jones Biblical Worldview Conference. And I got to tell you, if you get a chance to do that, listeners, it is outstanding. I'd kind of ignored the call for many years, and my wife and I went, and just incredibly encouraged, and it was really a great conference.
Yeah, and we enjoyed having you all there for sure. Okay, so you have worked with students of varying ages, both in and out of the classroom. So talk with us about how you manage student behavior. What have you found to
Yeah,
be some of those, I guess, guideposts, maybe we could call them, as you
yeah,
work with students? What do you think?
yeah. So it's great. I think that the key, what you had said before, was so important, was that your lesson can be fantastic on paper, but if you can't manage a classroom, that lesson isn't very valuable. And so being able to manage students is just critical for an effective classroom environment. And I know when I first started education, it was all about, like, what's your discipline plan? What's your discipline steps? And yes, that's a part of it, but I'd rather us learn to manage this behavior so that we don't necessarily have to do as much disciplining. And so that management is just so key. And so when I think about, and we always, we onboard new teachers every year. And so we just sit down, we talk about how do we manage these students. We would love to think that they're all going to be angelic, but they're not. And we have, again, 7th through 12th graders on this campus. And so just a wide range of of maturity levels, and that's okay. But for me, the first thing is there's got to be a respect for the students, and we often think about respect for they got to respect us, got to respect the teacher, and kowtow to us, but we also need to be respectful of them. They are made in the image of God. They have value as individuals. They are somebody's child. We absolutely have got to show respect for them, and that means just the tone in which we talk to them is so important. Using discretion, how we talk to them about a behavior issue, about how they should stop talking, or how they should quiet down, or how they did on a test or a quiz or an assignment. Like, there's got to be respect shown them, and the students can absolutely tell if they're not being respected. And it works. Got to work both ways, right? And I'm not respecting them because they're the authority, but just because they are, again, made in God's image. They have value as a human being. Again, I want how's my child being treated by somebody, and I'm going to support the teacher's discipline. But you also should talk respectfully to my daughter, So I think just respect for our students is kind of step number one in how do we manage them effectively. A second thing for me is consistent and clear expectations. I hate surprises. If this wasn't laid out for them ahead of time as the expectation, then it's hard to really discipline or change it. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't later on correct that, because now we're communicating the expectation. But initially, we've got to lay that out. And I do, especially with my junior hires that I taught, I did a lot of modeling early on of here's how we do things so that there's not a surprise. I always enjoy doing kind of an interactive discussion with me, right? When they were corrected, and how do you respond to that? I used to joke with them. I'd say, okay, let's just say that we're reading quietly in class. And I look over to you and I say, hey, Johnny, please read. And they say, oh, I was. No, you don't need to respond to me. You just need to start reading, right? And I tell them, you're not in trouble when I say read, but you are in trouble when you begin talking back and challenging that. But it's holding to that expectation every single time. It's going to be clear, and we're not going to surprise them with that expectation. And so, again, respecting them, being clear with their expectations of them is just so important. A third thing that really gets put onto us as teachers is we have to be prepared for class. If your activities are not ready, if your lessons aren't ready, if your copies aren't made, I know on the days when I was really on top of things, and I understand there are days when we're just trying to survive as educators in the classroom. But if I was on top of things and I was showing a video, that video was already queued up, ready to hit play. I was at the 2-minute and 12-minute mark, right, or whatever it was, so that I could hit that and be ready. My slideshow was already on my projector, ready to go. And so every single step was done, because as educators, we know that every little
makes a difference. Yeah.
That gap makes a difference, right? And they seize those opportunities.
Oh, yes.
So the more that we could fill, and so it is being prepared. We're a block school, and so for our 90 minutes, we are maximizing that 90 minutes, and we're going to overplan so that it is tight in those 90. So it's a little bit like public speaking, right? Where you either sweat in preparation or you sweat in class.
That is true.
I wanted to sweat in preparation, and I want to make sure that I was ready so that wasn't the reason for the students' misbehavior. The fourth kind of principle for me in managing is our thoughtful transitions and procedures. As I'm in the position now where I do a lot of observations, and the number one time that behavior is an issue are during transitions. And those are hard to do. A 90-minute block, I want my teachers to do at least 5 different things each class period, which is also part of the management. We'll get there in a minute. But all of those transitions are just so important as you move from one activity to the next. And so for myself, it was, all right, class, we finished this activity. Please pass your handout to the front. But I'm still talking during all this time. So as you pass those items to the front, let's just recap again what we talked about real quick. Or what were your 2 takeaways from what we just talked about? And okay, Johnny over there, what's your 1 takeaway? Fantastic. But again, I'm still controlling the conversation, the discussion of the class, not leaving again that wiggle room for students to get off task. And is that exhausting for teachers at times?
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's not as exhausting as trying to get them to quiet down again.
True.
So I want to keep them just highly engaged in those transitions, keeping them tight and really having a plan. And I think also the more that you do it, they're going to get used to that routine. And so there won't be the same surprise, and they will be quieter during those transitions. So yeah, to me, it's just super, super important. But even things like some of your procedures with that transition time is at our school, we all do attendance every class period. We sign up for lunch every single morning. We do things what is your procedure that works for you? I cringe when I watch some things that get done, and there's usually pretty easy solutions for a lot of those procedures. And it's how you start class. I know for us, we try to have some kind of a bell ringer activity or whatever you want to call it, where the kids come in and there's a task on the screen already. And that allows the teacher to do the lunch stuff, to do the take attendance. But the kids also aren't just doing a free-for-all during morning announcements because of the activities. So just thoughtful transitions is also really effective. And there are things that we can control as teachers. It doesn't matter who those kids are even. These are a lot of things that we can do on our own to help make classroom management easier and a more well-behaved student body. So a 5th one is just moving around. Be active in your classroom. Teachers, I get it. It is so easy to sit. It is enjoyable to sit. My wife is in elementary, but taught 5th and 6th for years. And she always taught from the back of the classroom. She wanted to be back there. I can't say that was me, but I was the guy who was actively wandering up and down aisles. If I see a teacher using PowerPoint without a remote control, I'm going to IT so fast so they can get a remote control so they can actively move around that classroom. Yes. And that just changes the whole energy and vibe of the room by teachers actively moving and being engaged. Proximity matters, right?
For sure.
We know where to stand. We had an assembly this morning, and I went and stood by some kids on purpose, right? Because proximity matters, and the behavior, I don't have to say a word. Like, it's not disruptive, and I can just stand there and quickly they change their behavior. So again, respect for students, clear expectations, teachers being prepared, thoughtful transitions, move around. And then similar to the being prepared is engaging and varied teaching strategies. If you're doing the exact same thing every day, it's probably going to create some boredom, and then that can create some mischievous. Now, I say that with a little bit of tension in me, because I also know that my junior hires actually thrive in routine, and they thrive in some normalcy and understanding what's going to happen each day. But I think even within that routine, there are opportunities for variation. And then with the older students, even more so. But it is mixing it up a little bit. It's doing scavenger hunts in the classroom. It is looking at photos. It is taking direct instruction as well. But all of that is part of it. And as a school, we have really prioritized in the last 5-6 years our learner-centered activities. If it is just the teacher talking, they're checking out, and that does create behavior. I was a guy who could make my class kind of be 100% silent. That's no fun either. It's not a good learning environment. And so trying to create those energy levels where there's learner-centered activities. And so for us, let's give them an avenue to talk, but talking on point, talking in the right direction. So as I onboarded a new history teacher this year, we took our here's a little plug for you. We took our Bob Jones notes from Trove, but then we embedded in that all kinds of questions, all kinds of activities, all kinds of think, pair, shares. Boy, I gotta tell you, I love a think, pair, share, but it just gets them thinking and gives them a chance to interact with the materials. Besides them learning more, it also gives them a chance to interact with the information, and allows them to speak a little bit, and because they do need to
Sure.
speak a
Yeah, it
little bit.
solidifies it too.
And
Yeah.
100%. So all of those things. So just engaging learner-centered activities are going to help keep them on task. And I'll tell you, I was a teacher who I was talking this morning to some colleagues about the trends of education, right? In 26 years, I've seen trends. Jenny, you've seen these trends come and go. And when I entered, it was very much a direct instruction world, especially in history. And it was a lot of me in a PowerPoint, and I'm bored just thinking about it. But um, that is what I did, but now to be able to have some variety and mix up so the kids can be more attentive and more engaged, I think goes a really long way. In changing, I lost a little bit of my behavioral control. However, what I got out of it were students who were interacting and talking about the material, and I think thinking a lot more than I was. I remember being asked at a conference years ago, who's the most tired person in your classroom? And I said, well, it's me by far. And he's like, that's wrong. It needs to be the students.
It might
And
be a
so trying
tie.
to get them thinking. It might be a tie,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and then lastly, on my just how do I manage student behavior is really knowing our students. And so getting to know them on a personal level. It's simple things like going to their events. I was at a basketball game last night, and so today gives me an opportunity to say, "Hey, Johnny, great game last night." And whether they saw me there or not, now me making the comment to them knows that I was there. That creates a conversation point for us. But knowing them, boy, learning their names as fast as possible is just critical for classroom management. And so that's my teachers. We start the year off. I require a seating chart early on, and I was the guy. If I was in the back of the room and a kid raised their hand, I had to know their name. I'd run to the front of the room and look at the name, and then say Johnny, yes, because I'd got to repeat it. And I think we all know the cycle of learning names, right? We know their names when they're in their seat, but we don't know their name outside of campus. And then we finally learn that sentence. So we do, but it takes a while. But once you do, just the management. When I've had to, I subbed for a whole year before I got my job at Grace back in '98, and teachers who didn't give me seating charts, it was a nightmare. Like I say, hey, you in the black jacket, stop talking. It doesn't work. And so, but know your student and learn about their interests, and then ask them about it while they're working independently, while they're working in a group. Hey, Johnny, how was this? And that's, boy, if they see that you are caring about them and remembering things, and boy, and in our environment, boy, how can I be praying for you? Like what great avenues that we have at our schools to be able to kind of show interest and care and demonstrate that. So
Yes, that's excellent. Those are super practical, great guideposts for anyone in classroom management. I noticed the things that you said, like I know you work at middle school, high school level, but those are timeless for all ages. So often in classroom management, the new teachers have heard the basics, but they're experiencing it and I guess really giving it a go for the first time. And wow, what a difference it is between those university class simulations and actually being responsible for managing a room full of living, breathing, they're moving human beings. Definitely a difference. At the same time, the seasoned teachers have done this for a long time, for sure. They have found some tricks that become their go-to. They've refined their tool belt a little bit, but so often they forget about some of those basics. So I'm sure you've experienced both and even have worked with colleagues on both ends of the spectrum. So in your experience, what would you say are some of the basics of classroom management and then also of discipline?
yeah. So some of those basic thoughts are, boy, we've got to call them to a biblical standard to our students. We're not just doing this to make your life miserable. We're not asking you to obey us just to be mean. I had this convo with my daughter recently. I'm not trying to be mean to you. There's a purpose behind it. And let's call them to a biblical standard. Here's what God's word says. Here's what we're calling. Not every one of the items that I mentioned above, right, is a biblical standard, but there is some order and respect involved toward the educator, and there's being a good steward of the abilities and gifts that we've been given. And so let's call them to that standard. So there is kind of the reason. We don't always have to give the reason why, but it's helpful when we can. Also, correction is not negotiable. I don't understand when we negotiate with our students.
Yep.
It's not negotiable.
It's a common thing these
I,
days.
I've had students come up to me after I tell them, I said, if I correct you in class and you disagree, come after class and say, hey, Mr. Koster, I don't think I was doing what you said I was doing. And I'd say, oh, my bad. And we move on. The fact that they came and if they stopped the behavior and came and talked to me about it, there's no consequence. It's just a quick correction. But we're not going to negotiate. If I gave you a 15, 30-minute detention, guess what? We're going to serve a 15 or 30-minute detention. And so there's we've got to be not negotiable. And kind of connected to it too. So never threaten what we can't enforce. I know as a teacher, I would put my syllabus together and my discipline steps, and I would bring it to the administrator who oversaw discipline. And I said, hey, is there anything on this that you don't have my back on, that you can't enforce with me, or that it's too steep of a consequence? And as a principal, I've seen times when teachers have put things in there that, hey, I can't support you on that one, so let's tweak it. But let's talk ahead of time so that whatever I do threaten, I can actually carry out. Whether that's late work or it's behavior issues, there's got to be follow through. Also, this is a balancing act one, but don't give your authority away to administration. You are the front line. You've got to be the one disciplining your students. Now, I say that also with, in April, I don't want to hear from you telling me that Johnny has been a terror all year and I've never seen him one time. That's wrong too. Please engage us in that way before this point. But you need to work at Grace. We require a teacher to have clear discipline steps. So I'm going to say, hey, where is Johnny on the steps? Where are you at? And they have some flexibility in those steps, and they're also steps that we say you must include as part of your plan. And so where are they? But you've got to work through those. And I'll get to what some of those things are in a minute, but use administration, but you have to be the first one of first line of discipline. The next one, Jenny, we both heard in our ed classes a long time ago of not smiling until Thanksgiving. And I kind of hate saying it because it's just so cliche, but it's cliche for a reason because it is true. And I don't know if it's Thanksgiving or not, but just the sentiment of all new teachers say, boy, Mark, these kids have really been great. And I thought about doing this with them, like a kind of a special treat. And I'm like, it's mid-September. Let's hold on to that treat.
Yeah, we might not be there yet.
Until mid-April, right? We have a long way to go here. And so let's not, let out the leash, right? That far quite yet. And so obviously you're going to smile, you're going to love on them the entire school year. But when it comes to managing your class, err on the side of strict or firm. When I'm in a class in mid-September and they're getting groups and the kids are making their own groups, I cringe a little bit. I think they haven't earned that privilege yet. You need to keep showing that you're in control. It starts with, hey, you could work with the person behind you. You can work with the three people around you. But if you're actually getting out of your chair and moving somewhere else, boy, you've got to have earned that. And you don't earn that in the first 10, 20% of the school year. And so teaching is emotional, it's relational, it's exhausting, and it's so hard to pull that back once you've let it out. And I'll tell you, I have done this. I've messed up on this. I have one student always in my head.
We all have.
Yeah. And I remember going to her saying, after school, after a class, hey, can you sit around for a minute? And I just said, I've allowed you because I find you so entertaining. I find you funny. I laugh at your comments, but I've allowed you to go too far behaviorally that I'm sorry for letting that happen, and I need to rein it back in. And so I can't allow you to continue to be this way, even though personally I find it entertaining, but for the class, it's not good for the class. And so it's recognizing that in ourselves too. And yeah. So another one is just high expectations for all students. I also have tension on this one when it comes to I don't really want to know about the kids coming into my classroom. I want to start with a clean slate. I know there's some wisdom of knowing, hey, these kids they shouldn't sit together, or the disciplinary issues, but I kind of liked not knowing very much. And because I want to treat them as though they can reach the goal.
Yeah.
They can
Clean
have good
slate.
behavior. 100%. I think the more kids are told something about themselves, they're going to become that
Yeah,
person.
they believe it.
We had a principal several years ago, and I remember him saying that one time his son was called like a goofball. And he was like, don't ever call my son a goofball, because the more he hears that, he's going to become a goofball, right? And so I get it. And so I want to treat these students as though they are capable of achieving both the academic and the behavioral goals set out for them. So, um, and then I mentioned a moment ago is follow your discipline steps. So whatever those steps are for your school, your classroom, it is just imperative to follow those disciplinary steps that you've set up.
Excellent. Okay, so in spite of our best efforts, we still have times when behavior just wanders right on past those guideposts that have been set up. So then what? Marc, share with us some of your insights about what do you do when students do actually need to be disciplined? What happens?
Yeah. And I got to tell you, teachers, you're going to do these things every single day. Every day you're doing these things, and kind of all class period. Like this is just normal stuff that goes on. And these are going to kind of go from the basics to the I guess the other end of involving administration. And I referenced earlier, we require our teachers in their syllabus to include their disciplinary steps. And so the first thing is simply eye contact, right? It's so basic, right? But we're looking at a student. Again, in our assembly today, I made eye contact with numerous students, and to get them to correct their behavior. As again, I'm walking around the classroom, I will put my hand on a desk, and that hand on the desk is communicating, I want you to stop whatever behavior you're doing right now. And by the way, I've told them this as well beforehand. If I walk around and I put my hand on your desk, whatever you are doing in that moment, I want you to stop. Maybe that's tapping your pencil. Maybe that is folding paper. Maybe that is you're going into your backpack right then. Whatever you're doing, I want you to stop. And so that's also part of that clear communication.
Right. I was just going to say that clear expectations.
Yeah, here's what that symbol means, right? That gesture, and kind of with the eye contact, it's just even saying a name. I mean, if I'm doing something, I am doing direct instruction, and I just say Johnny in the middle of, hey, Christopher Columbus came to America, Johnny, and he did this. Like me saying your name, Johnny, that's the same as me tapping your desk. You know that I'm asking you to stop what you're doing, but it's all kind of that very, very first thing that we're doing all day. All class period, it's the eye contact, but it also might be in a word form or a tap form. Yeah. So that's the very first one, which is just, again, so basic, but we need to do it all the time. And again, and you being actively moving around the room is going to help with both those things, with the eye contact. The next one is a verbal correction. Johnny, I need you to please stop doing that. And again, that tone is going to matter, because I'm going to want to be respectful of how I say that. Because I'm actively moving around the room, it's oftentimes a squat next to their desk. It can be standing and bending over. And at times it is in front of the classroom, just because we're moving along. And I'm saying, hey, Johnny, I need you to please stop talking right now. And we just keep going. We don't elaborate on it. We just say it, and we go on. But that quick comment, just addressing whatever the inappropriate behavior is, I'm going to make that comment. So thirdly, it happens again. Now we need to contact parents. They are, I'm assuming at all the Christian schools, right? We want to partner with our parents. And that's just a key foundation, right, of who we are. And so I want to engage them right away. And my first email to parents, Jenny, is so simple. It is a Mr. and Mrs. Jones. I had to ask Johnny to stop talking a couple of times in class today. Any help that you could be on your end is appreciated. That's it. And we're moving on. It is just, could you talk to him on your end too? And we're touch and base. It's a cut and paste email, changing a couple of names, and we're good to go. But that helps a lot. I know for me, like I was more afraid of dad than I was of my principal. And it's not always the case in today's generation, but nonetheless, we want to partner with them. And most of our parents, 90+% of my school are going to respond favorably to that email and really be grateful for it. After that, everybody's school is laid out probably a little bit different. I will put my student outside, and we don't have hallways in California. We just have outside. And that was, by the way, just a side note, quite shocking to me when I first moved from Washington State down here.
What happened to the hallways?
Yeah, you talked about inclement weather earlier, and we are going to be at a brisk 72 today. So it's pretty chilly.
Suffering.
Right, suffering for Christ here. So, So I'll just have, hey, I've already made the eye contact. I've already given Johnny. We've had a word of like, hey, I need you to stop talking. If it's between classes, he's already been parents reached out, and this might happen, by the way, without a parent reach out. If it's happened multiple times in one class period, I'm saying, hey, Johnny, would you please step outside? And I'll tell you, one of my negotiating things comes up here a lot is. The students would figure me out after a while, and I would model this for them as well, but they wouldn't all remember. But when I say, Johnny, you step outside, I continue with my lesson. I keep going, and I expect him to get out of his seat and go outside. And if he hasn't, the tone of my voice changes. It goes initially from, Johnny, please step outside. And then it becomes, Johnny, I asked you to step outside. But I keep going back to my Christopher Columbus lesson, and I'm moving. And he might be looking around at his friends for like, what do I do? But I'm ignoring that behavior until he walks outside. And I've told them, here's where I want you to stand outside of my classroom. You can go on the right side, which is in front of the window. I don't want you there. The left side, there's no window, and that's where I want you to stand until I get out there to talk to you. That outside time allows me to remove him for a class for a minute, escalate it a little bit. It's also going to give me a chance to have some one-on-one time with him outside. Now, that outside time is 5 minutes tops. If it's more serious than that, then he needs to go to the front office. But 5 minute top, and at some point in that activity, right? So I'm going to say, hey guys, why don't you turn to a neighbor again real quick and just discuss with them, why Columbus came to the New World. And while they're doing that, I'm slipping out the back. They don't even see me go outside. I step outside, and Johnny is there. Hey, Johnny, what happened today? Why do you think I sent you out here? And he tells me that he has no idea why, because
of course
that's what 13-year-olds do. And so I remind him, here's what you did. And hey, if this continues, we're going to have a detention or something else. And at that point, I'm also going to reach out to mom and dad again. So I'm going to send another email to them. Hey, mom and dad, had talked to Johnny outside today. The behavior continues to continue. If you could talk to him on your end, that would be helpful. So put him outside, and then issue a detention. And that detention is from me, the teacher, not an administrative. We have two different types at our school. We have administrative and we have teacher ones. This is a teacher detention. And this is for me, it was a 15 or 30 minutes. Actually, it was 30. I think 5 is ridiculous. And not an incentive, but again, works for you. That's great. But for me, we jump to the 30. If you don't come, it becomes 60 because again, we're not negotiating. And there's also, Jenny, and there's still a reasonableness here too. Just as a side note, where I tell my new teachers, if I put them outside, if I give them a 30-minute detention, and they come to me the next morning, hey, Mr. Koster, I found out I have an orthodontist appointment. Could I serve it tomorrow? Absolutely, right? There's a reasonableness to these things, but we're not going to get them off the hook. But if you need to delay it a day, no problem. And then if that continues, right, if we continue to remind them of behavioral issues, we've talked to mom and dad, we have asked them to step outside, give them a detention, then we're going to go to the front office. And at that point, I want to involve administration in this. And is it possible to go from 0 to office in one class period? Absolutely. Like we have, if there's profanity at a certain level, if there's disrespect at a certain level, if there's a threat to the class, you are escalating that from 0 to 60 in a second. But those are very, very rare, and at least at our school, very, very rare. But following these, it just is a process toward working through these, where again, you are the authority as a teacher. You're managing that yourself, but there is a point where we want you to involve administration because they're not learning from you what we need them to learn.
Yeah.
And actually, it's affecting the rest of the class too,
Sure,
which
of course.
boy, it's a problem. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the direction that we give our teachers here and principals that I followed during my time in the classroom that really proved to be helpful.
That's great. Those specifics are really, really helpful. So one thing about this topic is that every teacher listening connects with this topic in some way. Classroom management isn't age specific, it isn't subject specific. So Marc, as a wrap up, what is your advice to teachers and principals, maybe as they find themselves struggling with classroom management? So classroom management struggles, they can be exhausting, disruptive, frustrating. And while we can sometimes identify the symptoms of the struggle, many times there's a struggle in just how do we even address the main issue? Like, how do we dig into the heart of the problem? So what would be your advice to any struggling educators who are listening today?
I would take a step back and I would really evaluate just your process here, right? What you're doing. I would make sure you have a strategic plan in place. Even what content I just went through, use it as almost like a checklist for yourself. How are you doing in these areas? But have a plan, have a strategy. I know at times we've had teachers need to go back to their students and say, as a whole class, hey guys, I wasn't consistent with these things. This is not the way that I want my classroom to run. But starting on Monday, right? And this is those things you can't go to that well very often. You can't do that 4 times during the school year because it's a joke. But you can have a reset time. Like, hey, we need to reset this. We need to re-strategize it. And I'm sorry to you, students, for not being consistent. And I really want to work at this. And I do understand that a lot of these things I went through are they're more natural and organic for some people than for others. For others, it's really a struggle to manage the class. It's not your propensity. It's not your default. And that's great how God made you that way. But it is important to find a way to manage your students and instruct. We need them to learn the material, interact with others, be respectful of one another. My overarching classroom, rules were kind of the 3 R's of 3 different levels of respect for me as the teacher, respect for their classmates, and respect for themselves. And respect for themselves feels very touchy-feely. It's not meant to, but it's really giving yourself a chance to be successful. Like, come to class prepared for class. Do your homework. Listen, right? Respect yourself enough, and then classmates and the instructor. But we've got to all be doing those things for the classroom to be successful.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we could have months of weekly podcasts about classroom management and still not scratch the surface of applications, plans, successes, battle scars, ideas, and on and on. But Marc, what you shared today, that was very thought-provoking and challenging as we just keep in the race, as we keep working to daily impact the lives of the students Lord has put in each of our classrooms for this year. So Marc, thank you so much for being willing to share with us today. It was so great having you on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And to all of those of you who are listening and watching, thank you for joining us today. I hope you were challenged and encouraged by what Marc shared. Remember to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to submit questions and to learn more about the show. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. Now, once again, it's time to get back to your day. But it's not just any day, because every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Go do what God has called you to do.